Welcome. I'd like to welcome you to, this is the first real event in our Veterans Month of Honor and Remembrance, part of our Veterans Speaker Series. We're going to have another number of speakers, and we hope to continue this tradition on into the future. Anyone who's been here a while knows that Veterans Month is very important to us and to the campus. The History Department does a great deal of coordination. In this case, we'd like to thank the BARC, the founder of the feast, the Veterans Academic Resource Center. If you're not aware of it, tell your veterans friends that there's lots of help for them available at the BARC, which is right across the street. We also have a lot of partners, and you'll see it on all of our posters. This is a collaborative effort at the University of Central Florida to spend a month thinking and honoring veterans. Well, our guest today is a veteran. That was clever on our part, wasn't it? And he's a veteran who now works for veterans, which many veterans do after they've served. Our speaker is Dr. Bryce Carpenter, and he has had a crazy career. Let's talk about first the Army thing. Now, there's a perfectly good airplane. It takes off and it lands correctly. Correct? Planes do that. But some people decide to get off early. And he decided to get off and jump out of a perfectly good airplane and be airborne for 74 jumps. Really? But despite that, he managed to get a PhD from the University of Wisconsin. And he went on to be an academic, an assistant dean, and had an outstanding academic career. But obviously, he felt the call to serve again. And right now, he's with the Department of Veterans Affairs, National Cemetery Administration. Now, we know Dr. Carpenter very well because he is working with us on the Veterans Legacy Program, which, if you haven't heard about it, is going to be officially launched next week and is quite an effort to use the national cemeteries as a way of teaching history, teaching both about broad American history and the history of American veterans and also particular people who made a difference in our country's history. Most of them, though, are not the famous people you hear of. They're the people who served and lived through the war and came back and built America. So, that's who we're going to hear about, because I wanted Dr. Carpenter to come, because we have veterans here. I want them to see, particularly when you're young, that there is a life after. You can use what you learn in the military to make a successful career, but you can also keep remembering veterans and go on and serve them later. So I would like you to welcome Dr. Bryce Carpenter to our first Veterans Series.
Thanks for that introduction, Dr. Gannon. No podium, this feels like sort of a TED Talk, and so we'll see how this goes. I have to say, first of all, I'm actually a little nervous, even though I've spent really my entire adult career getting on my hind legs and telling young people what they're supposed to think and write. I've never had to do this to get up and talk about myself. So for me, this is quite a change, and it's something personal. And so thank you for coming here and taking this little journey with me, and I hope it's of some interest, if not some cause of question. And I hope at the end of this there's some time for any questions any of you may have, not just about me and my success story life, but just about national service. And it doesn't necessarily mean uniform service. It means serving your town, serving your community, serving the person next to you, whether they know you're doing it or not. And that is the point. So about that title, Dr. Carpenter, Breaking Contact. I came up with the breaking contact part, and I'll explain that. But a success story, not so much. I would say it's wholly inconsistent with my upbringing, and I would never do that. I would never call myself that. In fact, I can hear one of my beloved teachers back from my Irish Catholic childhood in New York, Sister Jean Marie, chastising me from the hereafter. So you're a great success story now, is it? You know? No, sister. But it's your name there, isn't it? Yes, it is, sister. She bore an uncanny resemblance to the Sound of Music's Julie Andrews. And everybody teased her about that, but she didn't have a guitar as a weapon, she had algebra. And I never did take an advanced degree in mathematics, but she remains to me one of the greatest influences of my life. But even though I went to humanities and I didn't do math, I tell you, maybe accounting would be not a bad side dish. Just a little business advice for those of you. Anyway, What she taught me remains an enduring lesson, and I relearn it every day. Life is about serving others. It's not about creating any definition of success. It really is not a label I've ever used in myself, and the only label I'm here to talk about today is veteran. I do work for VA, that is the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and if you ever hear anyone call it the Veterans Administration, please correct them. That went out in 1973. But veteran is really kind of a new label to me, even though I've been a veteran for longer than I know how to do math for. It's only a label that my family has used when talking about me. It's never something I've worn on my sleeve. It's never a badge I wore. Not until I joined VA, because that's what we do. You don't need to be a veteran to work for VA. But I guess across the department, around the 360,000 employees of VA, probably about a third are veterans. In my little agency within VA, the National Cemetery Administration, about 70 to 75% of us are veterans. That is uncommon. It's really not a requirement, but it just kind of points out how veterans are drawn to this, and I hope I'll get to why some of that is. So, yes, I am a veteran. That's me. I joined the Army halfway through my undergraduate school, which is a little odd. Some people do it right out of high school, or they do it right after college. I did it right in the middle. And I didn't do it because I needed a trade. I didn't do it because I needed a way to go to college. I was already in college. I did it because I wanted to serve. And once I made the decision as a college student that I was going to go to graduate school and prolong my Ericksonian moratorium as long as possible, I decided I need to do this while I could. And so I did. I went off and I raised the right hand, and then I dressed like a salad for several years thereafter. Okay. I guess it's not in the new lingo, the salad suit. Okay, congratulations, it's a museum exhibit. There you go. The seed for service was planted in me long before that, and I have to talk a little bit about the school I came from. My middle school and high school years were spent in an all-boys Catholic military school. I know, that sounds pretty scary. Or like a movie, right? They should have made a movie of it. I went to LaSalle Military Academy, and I'm really proud to have done so. We wore uniforms, the same ones as West Point, actually. And we learned that we had to order ours before they got theirs, otherwise we wouldn't get ours till Christmas, right? Because they came from the same supplier. But unlike other military academies, even though we lived the Corps of Cadets lifestyle, and we went to class, I mean, I loved it, it was great. But we never trained with weapons. I'm really proud to say that all the years I went to LaSalle, we were ranked by the Department of the Army as the #1 military academy in the country, but none of us knew how to fire an M16. That's not what it was about. It wasn't about making soldiers, it was about making people who serve. The vision of the De La Salle Christian Brothers, who founded the school in the 1880s, was to teach humility through social justice education, through volunteerism, and we did quite a lot of that off campus, out in our communities and in New York City. But also to temper that adolescent egocentrism through the experience of working towards the success of the unit, something bigger than yourself. And that was the lesson of the lifestyle of the Corps Cadets. The curricular wisdom of the Christian Brothers only became evident to me when I became a professor myself. I don't know, at the time I thought, it's great photo ops, good yearbook photo in full dress uniform, right? Prom was really great, you know, sabers crossed and you walk under, but I didn't really get the life lessons until later, even though it had already had such an influence on me. But it was a weird combination, right? That sort of Catholic school tradition and military tradition. A couple of people in my class went into holy orders, which for the non-Catholics in here would be like becoming priests or monks. Quite a lot went right to West Point or the Naval Academy. Because of the school I went to, we didn't need to get a congressman or senator, we could just go. And a lot did. And one of my senior year roommate actually just retired from the Army as a colonel in the Special Forces. And now he got to meet his wife again. That's a little joke, because when those guys go to the office, they may not come back for 6 years, right? Literally, I mean, it's different in SF. But he's a great guy, Alex McCallum, and I'm proud to call him my friend. But after 6 years of the Corps Cadets lifestyle, middle school and high school, I wanted a different kind of college experience. I wanted a regular one, and so I did. I went off to college, but the itch to serve remained. And like I said, when I decided that really my skill set was an academic one, I thought, I just need to do this. And I didn't do it for fame, I didn't seek a commission, I didn't do it for fortune, I didn't do it to be a hero. I did it as Sister Jean Marie taught me, just to serve. Just to serve. That's it. And I didn't do it to get a job, I didn't do it to become an HVAC technician or an air traffic controller. I picked up a rifle, and I did my turn. And that's it. I was a grunt. I was in the infantry. And that is something really important to me. The Army has many sort of cultures within it, and I think civilians don't understand that. The Marine Corps, they're very big on it. You know, there's many jobs with the Marines. They say every Marine a rifleman, and they train the Marines that way, and that is true. And the Navy is large and diverse professionally as well. But the Army is really a self-contained world. Every kind of job that you need to run basically a country, you have in the Army. Because now our Army's kind of in that business. They're running countries. Not everybody in the Army is in combat arms, even though all soldiers are trained for combat. But I was in combat arms. I was in the infantry. For those of you who don't know, when you see a war movie, that's what that job is. You don't really learn anything else other than how to do that. And it was challenging. It was rewarding. And if I went back in time to interview my 20 and 21-year-old self, I was miserable and I hated it, right? But you go forward now to my 983-year-old self, I wouldn't trade a day of it. I really wouldn't. So I really don't talk about what I did in the Army. I just don't. I'll talk about schools I went to. I'll talk about units I was in. That's about it. And veterans know why. I just won't. Partly because what's the point of serving if you make it about yourself? True. Partly because so many others have had to sacrifice so much more. I'm not a disabled veteran. I came out all right, at least physically. And a lot of people paid a really high price. So we should be talking about that. Anyway, they deserve all our attention and all the care that our Republic has to offer. It's part of what I get to do now, in some small way. But I knew from that very first day of MEPS. Does anybody know what MEPS is?
Yeah.
What is it?
Military Entrance Program? Or
Yeah, translation, please.
it's where you go to before you get out of the boot camp, basically.
Yeah, that's where they want to make sure that your oil's topped off, the wipers are fresh. I mean that physically you check out and you're ready for military service, and then the very last thing you do at MEPS, anybody remember? You raise the right hand, and that's when your life no longer belongs to you, and all those great Bill of Rights that you have, you no longer have. You have what, 4 rights as a soldier? Does anybody remember what they are? You have the right to billeted, which means you have a place to live. Sometimes that's outside, but you have the right to live there if they tell you, right? And I was a grunt. I lived outside 9 months of the year. You have the right to mail call. If somebody's going to write you a letter, they might as well let you read it, right? That's what they'll tell you, okay? You have the right to sick call. Although in my day, it was a little different. You didn't do that. You just didn't do that. And that's part of how VA has to service veterans in my generation, because it was the culture you just did not go on sick call no matter what. You know, if you had a sewing kit, you could sew your arm back on. They taught you how. You didn't go on sick call. But you had the right to, if you dared to. And then the last of the 4 rights, the right to chow, which is food. They don't give you a menu, but the food will come. And that was it. Life gets very different at that particular point. But I did it because the seed was already sown, as I said. And for me, Army was the military that I was familiar with. For me, joining the Navy would have been like, I don't know, moving to Mozambique or somewhere equally foreign. I just, the way they march was just too foreign for me. I already knew Army, so I just went Army. And there it was. But anyway, I knew from that first day of MEPS, raising the right hand, that I wasn't going to be a lifer. It's not my goal. And like all GIs, I kept a short timers calendar. Does anybody know what that is? What?
How many days left?
How many days left? Now, according to the true tradition of the short timer calendar, 90, right? It starts at 90 days out from whatever. From your ETS date, which is your last day in the military, according to your contract. It could be 90 days out from a PCS, which is permanent change of station. That means when you get to go from the horrible place you're stationed at to a new zip code of horrible, right? At least in the Army has pretty bad real estate. Navy has really good real estate. So if that's a consideration, I'd say consider it, okay? But anyway, I knew that wasn't going to be for me. I wasn't going to do it forever. I just kept short timer calendars from the very beginning, and people thought I was a little weird. But anyway, I did it, and I finished my time, and I ended up having to buy lots of stuff that I had to pin on my uniform. I didn't want to, which means, things, right? Everybody finishes with that. I did well, in other words. I made it, got a little bit of rank. It wasn't bad. For the time I put in, I did okay. And then I got out. I ETS, which is end tour of service. That means you've satisfied your contractual obligation to the United States Congress, because when you enlist, you engage in a contract with the United States Congress. Officers get commissions from the president, right? But you enlist to Congress. And I was done. And then I was thrilled. I was going to go back to college. Couldn't wait. I knew exactly what I was going to do. And I was ready. I was really ready. But then I thought about it. I was completely unprepared. Maybe if I did join and learn to be an HVAC technician, I'd have known what to do. Or if I did join to become an MP, a military policeman, I would know what to do. But I was just a grunt. And you look on, back in my day, you had to look at classified ads on the last page of the daily clay tablets that came around. But nobody hires grunts, nobody hires infantrymen. So I didn't know what to do except go to college. And I remember, it just all of a sudden became a big question mark. Breaking contact. Breaking contract is an infantry term, although I think we leased it out to other parts of the Army. It's what you do when your unit or yourself is unexpectedly engaged and you need to maneuver to a place where you won't be. That's a euphemism. What does that really mean?
Bug out.
Bug out, right? It means you're getting unwanted attention from people who don't want you there, right? So you break contact and you have to go away to somewhere safe to protect everyone else in your unit. So I heard from old timers in the Army like that, re-entry to the civilian world would be a lot harder than I could possibly imagine. They were wrong, I thought. What did they know about me or my original plans? That was different, right? Like any 24-year-old, I had all the answers I already needed, and it didn't need any of theirs. I couldn't wait to get back to college. But maybe there was something to what they were talking about. Smart as I thought I was, the Army really was all that I knew. As much as I'd seen in the world, the Army was my world. So the day before I was set to clear, to get that last stamp on my clearing papers, to get out, become a civilian again, get my honorable discharge, pick up my all-important DD Form 214. I couldn't help hearing what the old sergeant major and first sergeant were saying. So I went to the re-enlistment NCO. And that is the recruiting sergeant for people who are already in. It's like selling a car to someone who's already bought their first car. It's a totally different pitch, right? And that's what they're for. And so there I was at Fort Lewis, which is in western Washington. Beautiful post, except when you have to live outside, okay? Then it's wet. But I went to the re-up NCO, and I asked him about the Guard, the Army National Guard. I thought to me this was a way to sort of stay in the world. It was something I could do to hold on to the only thing I knew. Anyway, so there I was, I did it. Then I raised the right hand again, and I enlisted again, and engaged in, signed a new contract to stay in the Army National Guard. Now I thought I can go bravely into this world with my new security blanket, the Guard. But the Guard wasn't the Army, not my unit anyway. Just a lot of cops or people trying to become cops, and they were all wearing their weekend costume and enjoying it too much, treating CIBs as if it was the last merit badge to earn. CIB is a combat infantryman's badge. It is the proudest thing an infantryman can earn, even more than Medal of Honor. Because nobody wants a Medal of Honor, I'll tell you that right now. That means it's a really bad day in the office. And you were really lucky to get out of it. This CIB is a historic and special distinction for an infantryman. And to them, they just wanted to collect them all. They just want to be able to go to the clothing sales and just buy everything that they could possibly sew on. They didn't get it. And I didn't feel safe with them. Now, I'm only talking about the Army Guard of the era that I was in. To date, the Army National Guard and the Army Reserve component have done more than I think many Americans realize. I used to live in rural America, as Dr. Gannon mentioned. I lived in Montana for a long time. I have seen communities broken. I have seen ranches and farms go under because these reservists and guardmen are doing 5, 6 tours over in places most high school kids can't spell. And even though they're getting paid, it's not enough to make the mortgage at home or to make the payroll for the farmhands. And families are losing businesses because of that sacrifice. It's all right, we're in VA now, we got their back. But it took a while for the country to figure that out. So the Guard is different now than when I was in. When I was in, it was really just the Cub Scouts. And the thought of having to answer my pager, because that's what we had back then, in the middle of the night, to know that the balloon went up somewhere, terrified me. Terrified me. My last unit in the Army was a pretty high-speed unit, high-speed, low drag, and we were the kind of unit that we could be anywhere in the world ready to thump in 24 hours or less. I don't mean just show up and hang around at the duty-free shop and wait for orders. I mean ready to thump. So to go from a unit with that state of readiness to the Guard was a big adjustment, and it seemed more foreign to me. So it wasn't my Army. I used to say things to other people in my unit like, scroll to the road. And they'd look at me funny. I'd say, fire for effect. And they would get out a cigarette lighter. They had no idea what real soldiering was about. I might as well have been speaking Greek, but I wasn't. What I was doing on my non-Guard time was studying Greek and Latin. The more disappointing the Guard became, the more I immersed myself in my new world, my re-entry to college. And it helped, really, because little else did at that time. Going back to college when you're 3 to 4 years older than everyone else, it's difficult. I mean, I made friends, but like not the kind of friends you make in the Army. And that's something else that I think veterans don't talk about too much. When you're in the service, you see someone else dressed like a salad, you trust them with your life, even if you met them 2 seconds ago. You can do that. And to go from that world back into the civilian world where it's the opposite, where you have to watch your back all the time, it's a hard mental adjustment. So yeah, I got back into the social scene in college, but it's a little different. A little older than everybody else, and at that point in life, 3 to 4 years matters, right? If we have my age, it doesn't matter, it's fine. But back then, it's a big deal. So there it was. Social acceptance in college didn't really work. I had study partners, did the academic thing, but everybody thought I was a little weird. So I was a little older, and I was a little too intense. And the Army did that. The Army made me that driven, and I have absolutely no regrets. I wasn't a total weirdo in college, I just want to point out. I had a band. And actually, we were pretty successful. We made it. I went to college in Seattle, the University of Washington, and it was at a time when, the whole world was looking at the music coming out of Seattle. And yeah, we did open up for a lot of these sort of bands that I'm not going to name, that would be gratuitous, but it was a great and fun time. But we made a decision to stop trying to sell our music and get signed, although our music was so important. Right? We totally sold out, and we just learned the entire Led Zeppelin catalog and became a Led Zeppelin cover band, and we actually played out 4 or 5 times a week. And finished college with a lot of money in the bank and 0 debt between my GI Bill and my band. Bought myself a Jeep Wrangler for a graduation present with cash. And so, highly recommend cover band as a way to finance it. But I did that again because I was driven, right? So we were a band with 1 guitar player, it was me, and I had to learn Jimmy Page parts, and he's in the studio doing 4 or 5 guitar parts, and I had to figure out arrangements to sort of make this sound like something people would recognize. I was in the classroom, right? Majoring in history and classics, because for me, history wasn't enough. I can't speak to the rest of the Army, but in the infantry, 99% is considered a failure rate. It's not acceptable, right? For reasons you can determine on your own. So, you either take the objective or you don't. You bound out of the ORP for one reason, to move on to the kill zone and neutralize the objective, or it neutralizes you. And I know that sounds like very war movie sort of terminology. We talk like that all the time in the infantry, even if it means should we wait for the red light to cross the street? Yes, now time to bound out, SP this alpha alpha, move forward, baseline blue, access SP forward to Roger Bravo, Zulu, done. Translation, we crossed the street, okay? But it's true. When we weren't saving the world from democracy, right? We talk like that all the time, and everything we did was with maximum prejudice and maximum intensity. So that's what I did in college. I just didn't know any other way. Well, what we did in the Army, we did it for each other. But then you break contact. And then what do you do it for? So again, I was a classics major, I was a history major, and history was great. I loved history, still do. And I went on to become a professor of history and history education. History taught me people's motivations in a context that psychology as a field could not provide. Fascinated me. My interests were specifically in ancient history, however, and I craved that an unadulterated and unmitigated access to the history that history couldn't provide. I wanted the languages. And so for me, part and parcel of doing history was the philology, and that is studying languages and literature of another culture. So I was into the Greek and Latin just as intense as I was into the history, because the Greek and Latin are just tools. They get you to the history without filters, right? If that's the history you're trying to study. My professors told me I was a natural with the languages. Maybe it was a bit, but they never saw me work. I identified every methodological challenge before writing a paper. I negotiated every lacuna in the literature with textual criticism. I mastered verb forms and rare dialects of Greek that they didn't teach us, simply because I knew they might be out there. I asked for what they weren't teaching undergrads, what they were keeping for the graduate students, because I knew I needed to know it. I demanded to know what they were researching. I wanted to read what blind reviewers were scribbling in the margins of their rejected manuscripts. And some of them had the courage to show me. I'm so grateful for that. I learned a lot about scholarship in my undergraduate and graduate years, but really, I learned it at Fort Benning. And that is the truth. That kind of intensity made my undergraduate classmates look at me and ask me to chill out. But it drove me forward. And when I answered the last question of all in all my schooling, that last question of my dissertation defense, there was nothing left to do. There's no more question to answer. I was like, well, now what? You make other people answer questions, right? You flip around, you stand on the other side of the podium. And I've spent basically my adult life ever since in teaching. I taught K-12 and I taught higher ed, taught every level there is. And so for me, I see it as a way to continue to serve, teaching others how they can be the best versions of themselves. And I learned that also at Fort Benning, but in a different school. So my life's been devoted to education, which for me is about teaching the promise of democracy. If my years of being a professor were successful, it's only because I helped some young people find a way to meet goals broader than themselves, to seek new challenges they never knew existed, and then to meet them. And again, I didn't learn that. I learned that in the Army, but I didn't learn that at Fort Benning. I learned that on the 30th parallel. For my generation, Generation X, right, being a veteran is a unique experience. The generation before me, the boomers, they had a far more difficult experience. So theirs was a public experience of being a veteran. I'm talking about the Vietnam era generation, right? The generation after me, that would be the millennials, okay? Again, a very public veteran experience, and a public military experience. It's first generation, right? You know, when they talk about the Vietnam era veterans, they talk about Walter Cronkite bringing the Vietnam War into every living room on the 6 o'clock news and changed America. Now you can FaceTime with people in the Kandahar Valley. It's a completely different experience, and I think of historians what we're going to have to do as a trade 30 to 40 years from now. I'm glad I don't have to do the liberties, right? Let another generation do it. But for my generation, being a veteran, honestly, it sets you apart. It made you a little different. It was something that we just kind of, it was something we knew about ourselves quietly. We didn't get to experience the yellow ribbons. We didn't get to experience the military discounts. It was just something kind of odd. Like, oh, you did that. You raised eyebrows. Not a bad way. People are just always curious. They assumed you did it because you had to claw your way out of poverty. Or they assumed you did it because you had absolutely no other option. But, I don't know. I had my reasons. I already shared those. But then when I got into academia, being a veteran in academia, let me tell you, it's a very strange experience. I love the academy. And I love my job, but I really miss the academy. I miss that completely unfettered quest for unquestionable or uncontested truth. And you never get there. That's the point, right? The point is you just get closer. It's half-lives, right? It's just getting closer and closer and closer. All the time asking the question that was never asked before. And then answering it until you ask a better question. I love that process. And so I have a lot of respect for my colleagues. And I love being around them. But then they would look at me and they would think that my military service was anathema to all that. And I'll try to explain that it wasn't, but a lot of them just didn't see it that way. And I think that was just an experience of my generation. I don't know a lot of professors who are veterans, but when I do meet a professor who's a veteran, there's an immediate connection. And we don't need to break bread for that because we broke contact. And I remember when I came to UCF the first time, I met Dr. Gannon, and she outed herself as an Army veteran. It's like, I get it. And I did the same, right? And so there's just something there, and I think that's a very special veteran experience, to be in the academy and devote yourself to that kind of service while having worn the uniform and hung it up. So that's what it means to be a veteran, at least for me. And or at least that's what I can offer you. You leave your tribe, the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, you leave your world and everything you know, and you'll never forget it, and you'll be forever changed by it. And you'll never be the same. But do you want to? After that? You'll soldier on every day. You'll be an example of living without a failure rate. Of being that person who always puts the unit first, especially when your unit becomes something like your own family. The public will always wish us well as veterans, but they don't understand, though they have often, at least these days, really good intentions. They think veteran status is defined by your nightmares are lapses into impulse, or our need to bond with other alumni because we just can't talk to other people in the room. It's not really what all veterans are like, but I do see that at VA every day. These are good intentions by people who want to understand, they just can't. I've seen some veterans try to explain it, and I would say, don't. If you're a veteran, don't. Just don't. Lead by example instead, like we were taught to do at Fort Benning. Do by doing. Serve by helping others serve. The word veteran comes from the Latin veteranus. You know, so I'm happy to be a Latin teacher here. And veteranus means experienced in Latin. I guess that's a good translation, but it's like the word in English. It's got so many associated connotations, driven by context, but also by the burden of its own meaning. We inherit that experience as veterans, right? We inherit the meaning that the Romans themselves gave that word. Someone who has been trained to endure the unimaginable. From the horrors of the Somme, where all of my great-grandfathers fought, to the horrors of the Notre Valley, to the unforeseen and largely unreported bloodshed of Kwajalein Atoll, to the scorched, lung-searing air of southern Iraq. Or to endure life, knowing that the siren could go off at any second, sending you to a place that most textbooks in high school don't even have on a map. You prepared for it, and you prepared each other for it. And then you break contact. Give back. Thank you very much.
I think we should have some questions, don't you? Yes. Questions for Doug.
Whatever's on your mind. Yes, sir.
What was the hardest thing for you to do transferring back into the civilian world?
As they would say in the Army, I don't know if this translates to Marine Corps, but to shoot my azimuth, that is to find my direction. And when I realized I couldn't go back to being my pre-Army self, and that took a lot. And I think that took just a lot of self-awareness that I think a lot of 20-somethings really don't have to reckon with yet, because life's just still kind of so fun. There's so many diversions out there. I really just kind of had to cut away the white noise in my life. I mean, it was tough. I mean, like I said, I was a grunt, and so I operated in small units all the time, in squads, the light infantry model. And I knew that 10 people were always with me who had my back. And then when we're in garrison, that means like we all know like whose kids have parent-teacher conferences that day, who needs to go to the dentist, whose car needs a new tire. We knew each other and support each other in and out of the area of operation, as we call it, all the time. And then to leave that and realize that you just can't trust people the way you can trust like that. People are good, people are nice, people want to be kind, but then also civilians just want recognition. In the Army, you just don't. You just want to accomplish the objective. You just want to accomplish the mission. You don't want to sign your work, and you don't want to sign other people's work. You just want to do the job. And so those two things, right? The lack of trust, or knowing how to trust, I guess is a fair way to put it, and then just how to deal with other people's, let's just say, spectrum of humility. And at first I was very frustrated that I couldn't find what I had in the service, in the civilian world. And really, once I had to learn something about myself, to just say, well, you know, I mean, I said I'll talk about schools I went to. I went to sniper school, right, which is kind of a weird thing for an infantryman because you learn to operate with one other person or by yourself. But I kind of fell back on that and I realized that, well, it's time. It's time for one shot, right, to go into that mode and just like do my own thing and shoot my ass. And I just immersed myself into school. Once, I think I was fortunate enough that I found what I was good at in college, like fairly early on. And then when I did, I was just like, let's do this, because 99% is a failure rate. And that's how I treated every single class. Like it was a job, like it was an objective. And then I did. I got into the grad school of my choice, fully funded, fully supported. And then there, even still, focused, full on, 100%, meet every objective. Whatever everyone else is doing, don't even worry about it. Run your own race, meet your own objective. And then things were going pretty well for me too. I was earning other things and getting opportunities that my classmates weren't. So in order to get to that point, it was a pretty dark place at first, I'm not gonna lie. But then when I found how to take what I lost, and then turn it into a strength that other people didn't have. And then things really started to click. Yes, ma'am.
What's the most valuable lesson that you've learned, or like the best piece of advice that you have?
That's a really good question. Like, I assume from the military,
Or
right?
from throughout all your work?
Throughout my work, wow, that's a tough
Make it
question.
harder, sorry.
Well, now I work for the government, so I would say, like, make copies of everything. You know? I think what I can offer from my Army experience is I would say never, ever hold yourself back from success. I went to another school, which I'm not going to name, but where they always said, you can do more. You can always do more. And that is true. That is so true. When you've been awake for 5 days and you've covered over 80 miles on your own feet in those 5 days, and you've only had 2 meals in those 5 days, and you're carrying 60 pounds on your back until your buddy falls down and has to get medevac, then you carry his 60 pounds on your back too. And you still go on up and down the mountains of northern Georgia. You can always do more. You can always do more. When you stop, it's a choice. When you settle, it's a choice. You can always do more. That's what I took away from the Army. You know? It's intense, isn't it? Yeah. Dr. Lyons?
I'm wondering, what was the motivation for leaving academia? Not that, any of us that are here begrudging
Thinking about
it.
that.
Right, exactly. And the decision to move to the VA and to the NCA specifically.
Thanks for that question. Bart primed me, Dr. Gann primed me with that question, I should say. But as much as I talked about myself, I just talked about my roots instead of what I really do. But I do work for VA now, and it was a hard decision for me. I love working in education, higher ed as well as K-12. There's a law in this country, Public Law 94-142, which says every child physically present in the United States of America, regardless of how they got here, deserves a free and appropriate public education. So a lot of my career has been devoted to that too. I believe I'm a missionary of education, and I believe in the ultimate American meritocracy. So for me to leave that, whether in higher ed or K-12, and go work for VA, it was difficult. And I'm not gonna lie, there's days I really miss it. And some days it just don't go well at work, and I think about going back. But I come back to VA. It was, I think, an opportunity to help celebrate what other veterans have done. I mean, the veteran experience for every generation is different. So Gen X is kind of a weird veteran experience, and it's not going to be one that gets written up about in textbooks because we just don't have the numbers. We're a small generation. But you think of like the generation of my grandparents, the so-called greatest generation, and they would never call themselves out. Let me just tell you right now, the generation that fought in World War II. I don't know if we really think about World War II, what this country did. We should think about it more often. We assembled the largest fighting force in human history to fight, and we can always talk about the conspiracies and what FDR knew and didn't know, but ultimately what the people on the ground thought they were doing, what the people on the ships thought they were doing, they were fighting a moral and good war. So we can criticize the political history of it, but when you think about the individual history of the sailors, Marines, soldiers, there were no airmen yet, they were soldiers still. They thought they were fighting a good fight. And it was not just the largest fighting force ever assembled, it was the most diverse fighting force ever assembled. We as a nation asked people to go and fight people in the countries where they spoke the languages that their parents are speaking. Think about that. Think about that. And we only did that because of what we were able to do as a country. And so and the promise of this republic. And so I want to celebrate them. We're losing that generation at the rate of about 3,000 a day right now. The youngest known World War II veteran is 93. World War I veterans are all gone. And I know some of you here on this campus, right, have done very amazing and admirable work to tell their stories. One of my lines when I go and present this program to places, I say that generals and admirals have their myriad biographers, and they deserve them because these are great Americans who made astoundingly difficult decisions in trying times, and they affected American, if not world history, as a result of their leadership. But we don't really have the stories of the people who just got drafted or volunteered before they could get drafted. And so I would just like to see that example presented out to as many classrooms at any level across this country as possible. And some people, again, like the kind of people that I worked with, some old colleagues of mine, they're suspicious. They think, is this a recruiting effort? And I say, no, I don't work for the Department of Defense. I work for the Department of Veterans Affairs. That's it. And if this is meant to inspire the American young to do something, it's to always do more and to serve the people next to you without them knowing that you're doing it. To embrace the humility of service and to see a purpose in your function in the society by making it a better place for others. However it is you're going to do that. If you're going to go be a first grade teacher, we need some good ones. We really do. If you're going to run a small business, employ some people and treat them well. Right? If you're going to go on and be a scholar, find a way to use evidence so that other people can see the narrative that hasn't been told yet. If you're going to be an engineer, make this country safer and make the things that we depend on more reliable. Serve the people next to you without them knowing that you're serving them, and embrace it and always do more. So to highlight what veterans have done, and I think they've all done that because they've come back from these periods and they've been changed, and then they do these incredible things as veterans. So this is an interesting job that I have, and it's a way to help create opportunities for a lot of young Americans to do that.
I got someone back here I saw. Is that you, Sam?
Answer.
Oh, okay. Somebody else. And another question. Do you know what the NCA does? The National Cemetery Administration?
Someone asked that question.
Perhaps you could tell us that.
Yeah, that's an easy one. That I can do. And it won't be intense, I promise. There's a lot of intensity. But you ask veterans to talk. It's like hard to get veterans to talk, and it's always going to be intense. You know, I thought of coming in here with like a hat and covering it with pins and then just made you and guess what that was for? No, not my style. Yeah, my generation, we didn't really join the Legion or the VFW or that kind of thing. It's just not what we did. The National Cemetery Administration, that's the agency I work for within the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. VA is huge, it's about 360,000 employees, the largest federal department that doesn't wear uniforms. And there's three what they call administrations, so sort of senior level agencies. And there's Veterans Health Administration, which do the medical centers, the hospitals, the vet centers, the clinics, all those things. Then there's the Veterans Benefits Administration. And so they'll take care of people with disability claims, they'll have veterans with home loans, if they want that benefit, whatever. And then there's what I do. We're the tiny, tiny little agency. We're about maybe 1,400, you know, in this massive juggernaut of a department. And what we do is we operate and maintain 135 of our nation's national cemeteries. Not all veterans qualify for the memorial benefits of being in a national cemetery. And you don't have to, you know, do that if that's not what you want, even if you're eligible. It's a choice, it's an option. I should mention that we don't have Arlington National Cemetery. A lot of people think of that one. The Department of the Army kept that one. And they can have it, honestly, it's fine. But really, if you've served and you're eligible, you can be interred in a national cemetery. And it's completely free. And so funerals, like weddings and other rites of passage, is great expense for a lot of families. And so it's a wonderful benefit that's offered sincerely and implemented tastefully. But you know, I could go on with stories about the people in the cemeteries, the veterans, right? I like to say, you could have won the Nobel Prize in Physics. Which is pretty cool, right? You get this amazing paperweight if you win that, right? If you are a veteran and you choose to be interred in an national cemetery, it's not going to say that on your tombstone. We call them gravesite markers. It's not going to say that on your marker. It will say basically 8 things. Name. Last name, first name. No, it actually says it in civilian way. First name, last name. I know you always want to do like, you know, Smith, comma John, comma Olive Drab, comma 1 each. And that is really funny to anybody who's actually been in the Army, okay? Because that's how all supply sheets look. But it'll give, you know, the year you're born, the year that you passed, the branch of service, the last rank held. And then if you win a valor, I shouldn't say won, I just correct other people. You don't win these things, they're not contests. If you come back from a day in the office and somebody says, that's a silver star, then that goes on there too. And if you served in a recognized campaign, which is kind of contentious, and I work back in DC with like the Veterans of Foreign Wars, because there are a lot of people, especially in my generation, that served in places that Congress didn't put a label on. That was what the Cold War was like. People don't even know. People don't even know what the Army was doing back then. But then all of a sudden, you know, 9/11, and you know, it's a whole different era for veterans now, right? But if you served in what they call the Persian Gulf Campaign, that'll be on the marker. If you served in Vietnam, that'll be on the marker. So I can go up to Florida National Cemetery and walk around there with these amazing scholars. And then we can see some repeat customers, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. They just couldn't stop serving. It just gets in you. And so anyway, that's what the National Cemetery Administration does. And so unlike other places that like focus on like, come to our amazing place, they say, just go to the one down the road. There might be 90 minutes down the road, but there's a cemetery within 50 miles of 90% of Americans. And within 3 fiscal years, we'll have a cemetery within 40% of 100% of Americans. 40 miles of 100% of Americans, okay? That's the intention anyway, or with the exception being Alaska. But yeah, and there's so many stories there. And when you learn what these people did, and then you think about why they chose to be interred there. One story, I don't know if I shared this one with you folks, but it's one of my favorite ones. Out at we have a cemetery in Riverside, California, which is about an hour west-ish of LA, west-northwest. Yeah, huge cemetery, our biggest one west of the Mississippi. You know, there's this veteran, he passed, and the cemetery staff did everything they do, and they do it so well. And the family, you know, really felt like they were served appropriately, very grateful. And, you know, usually when people pass, when it's still recent, the families will visit the gravesite fairly frequently, you know, at least weekly. And then over time, of course, that changes. But the cemetery staff, you know, they process the paperwork, they make sure that the funeral happens, and then, you know, take all the burden they can off the family. But it's when they come back and visit, it's the ground crew. The guys who cut the grass, who clean the stones, the ground crew, right? They see the families, and they'll often talk to them and get these great stories from the families. And so the foreman out there at Riverside got to know this family that kept coming back to the gravesite of Corporal Thomas Now. And just like Corporal, U.S. Army. Well, I was once a corporal before there may be something else, and you know, it's fun rank, not really. I mean, it's the lowest level NCO. When you get promoted to corporal, you're like happy. You're like, yeah, I'm an NCO now, non-commissioned officer. It just means you get to do CQ duty on Christmas Day and New Year's so that all the sergeants can go home. But there he was, Corporal Now, freshly interred there. And it was, you know, once the family builds, you know, a relationship and they see this guy out there in the cemetery, you know, week after week, it took about 6 weeks before they finally share, like, yeah, he was actually in television. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Well, you know, produced a few things. Turns out this guy won 8 Emmy Awards. Right? Yeah, I know, right? And so he produced, like, it's just back in the 80s, was kind of his prime era, but like in the 80s, very popular, like these like hour-long, kind of like action-y kind of shows, like PI, private investigator kind of, he produced that kind of stuff. Very successful at it, right? You know, was one of the guys behind Magnum PI and stuff, like, and who would have known? Because all it says on his marker, Corporal, U.S. Army, despite whatever else that he had done in his life, that was the formative experience that he chose to be identified by and with in perpetuity. So I mean, like, things like that, right? Those are the kind of stories I love to tell. Like, they were influenced by their time in uniform, so they come back and they always do more. And they're so driven. But then, in the end, that's the only way they want to sort of sign out, as it were. So there's stories like that all over. We have about 3.5 million veterans interred in our cemeteries. We've got 4.5 million in the cemeteries, but eligible spouses and dependents can, depending on circumstances, sometimes be interred with their loved one, with their veteran. But we've got 3.5 million veterans out there. It's a lot of stories to tell. It's a lot of American history. We have another Veterans Legacy program out in California. I was talking to one of the undergrads in that program, and they said they couldn't believe how now they walk down the street and they pass 10 people, and they think 3 or 4 were veterans. So it's completely changed their view of American society at large. So I mean, just to know, like, you know, how many people are veterans and what that really means and what they bring back. I think for this particular country, I think that's something that we should all really think about. National memorialization, that is our national cemeteries, you know, what I do. Actually, I don't do the cemetery side of the shop. I do this, I come out to universities. We're the only country that does it. We're the only country that does it this way. I mean, think about that. I mean, our agency actually began with President Lincoln's vision when he stood on Cemetery Hill after he visited the battle site of Gettysburg a few months after the battle. And here's where I get to be a classicist, right? The old Latin teacher, great teacher. He was a good student of Caesar, and he knew Caesar had a problem. Caesar fought and won a civil war, but then he had to bring Rome back together. And he realized the way to do it in the moment was to mourn all the dead as Romans, not to focus on which side they fought for or why, but just to treat them like they all grew up the same way. And that was really a brilliant decision. It's called, it's more Latin, the clementia Caesaris, the clemency of Caesar. And to forgive and to mourn together like that brought the Roman Republic back together. But then Caesar made a few fatal errors, the Cleopatra thing. I mean, you know, he had a good decision, and then after that, he got a little suspect in his judgment, but that was a good decision. Lincoln saw that, and he thought, this is the way to finish the Civil War. But then President Lincoln, as we know, was murdered, but the people who came after him saw the goodness and the integrity of that vision, and they carried it forward. And so from 1862 to 1864, they built the first 14. And then they realized that's really a good way to go. And that's why we do this. And it's a way to remind ourselves that we're all fighting for self-determination here. That really is what democracy is about. It's not about any type of government. It's the chance to decide on your type of government, right? That's what a revolution was fought over. So anyway, that's what national memorialization means. It's this great living metaphor that is carried forward by the story of every single one of those individuals interred there.
Anything else, peeps? All right, one thing I gotta say, the other day, I got a new joke. I say, look, if something's gonna happen like decades from now, I say, come to Bushnell and see me. Tell me all about it. That's the Florida National Cemetery.
Yeah.
Just catch up with me there. Tell me how that worked out for you. But anyway, thank you so much, Dr. Carpenter. Our hosts would like to say something about the career.
Hi guys, I don't know if I can follow him. I'm Shauna from Career Services. Welcome to Career Services. How many of this is your first time here? Well, welcome. And for those who this is not, welcome back. We're happy to have you here. So just a really quick thing about our office. We're essentially here to help you with that life after graduation. My goal for you guys is that when you walk across that stage, you know, at graduation, you know what you're doing, whether it's going to graduate school or getting a job after. So we help with anything regarding resume critiques, job searching strategies, graduate school prep, LinkedIn, headshots, whatever it might be to help you moving on into that life after graduation. So if you need any help, just let me know. You can find my information on the website. I'll have business cards here afterwards. But I appreciate you guys coming, and hopefully I'll see you all soon.